My name is David Sommer. I'm one of the co-founders at Kudos, and I chair the judging panel, and I have one of these Talk to Me green badges, so do come and talk to me. I'm really pleased the organisers didn't have a colour-coded sort of traffic light system, maybe a red badge for Don't Talk to Me, and an orange badge of maybe after coffee, so I've definitely got the green badge. I'd like to start by saying how fantastic it is to see so many people face-to-face back in a room together after 2 years apart. It really is amazing to have everybody back. It's also been a really good year for the ALPS Awards. We've had 22 entries this year, which has been really impressive, I think, given what everyone's been dealing with. Each year, we ask all of the applicants to submit a statement of innovation, which is like a brief summary of the key points of their entry. And as with previous years, we're publishing all of those on the ALPS website, so you can see those and read them through when you want to. Also, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our judging panel. We have 11 amazing people that give 3 to 4 days of their time every year to sit down, read through a lot of applications, score them, ask questions, meet, and go through a really rigorous process to evaluate them. So thank you to our judges. Some of them are here today, so I'll just name check them. Andrew Barker, Kumar Bowling, Ian Craig, Richard Geddy, more from him tomorrow, Athena Hopner, Robert Ianello, Hasib Ifranula, Andrea Powell, and David Smith. So first of all, a big thank you to all of our judges. So this year we have 7 finalists. Each of them are going to present for 7 minutes in this session to give you a flavour of their entries. So they're going in alphabetical order. So we'll start in a moment with Andrew Smith from the Charlesworth Gateway, which is a paper status notification service that facilitates communication between publishers and Chinese authors. Then we'll hear from GigaByte, which is from GigaByte Press, which provides a rapid way and a cost-effective way to share research and increase inclusivity and accessibility. Then we'll hear from Hum, which is an exciting new class of software for publishers called customer data platforms. Then ICLR Case Genie, built by 67 Bricks, which is a platform to help barristers, law students, and solicitors find the cases they need but might not be aware of. Then we're going to hear from Impact Services from Emerald, which aim to make impact culture an everyday term, an everyday reality for researchers. Then we'll have Joint Commitment for Action on Inclusion and Diversity in Publishing, which has been spearheaded by Royal Society of Chemistry. And the joint commitment brings together over 50 publishing organizations, I think it's 53 currently, to ensure a more inclusive and diverse culture within scholarly publishing. And then finally, if that wasn't enough, we will then hear from Review Commons, which is from EMBO and ASAP Bio, and is a platform that provides high-quality expert peer review of preprints before submission to a journal. So those are our 7 finalists. So could we acknowledge our finalists first of all? So you're going to get 7 minutes from each of them. I'm hoping Andrew Smith is here. He is here, good, because he's first up. And I'll sort of let you know when your time's up, and we'll just rotate everybody around. So Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you, David. And thank you for the ALPS panel for the nomination. It's great to be here in Manchester for our Northern Conference. I'm Andrew Smith, I'm from the Charlesworth Group, and I'm going to talk about the Charlesworth Gateway Paper Notification Service. I'd just like to really give some kudos to my colleagues as well, Kelly Zhang and Vivian Wang at Charlesworth in China. Sadly, they can't be here today, but one day we will share the same stage, I am sure. Also, just to kind of give you a really brief overview of who we are at Charlesworth, we undertake really 2 core activities. The first is around editorial services, language polishing, copy editing. The second is around our China market representation services, whether that be sales, marketing, author marketing, or increasingly consulting and technology. So the problem the Charlesworth Gateway aims to solve is really based on our experience in China, working with hundreds of authors in China every week, and also working with STM publishers on their editorial workflows. What we've really noticed is there's a disconnect in terms of communication between authors in China and publishers. And this is really down to communication issues, cultural issues, but it's really creates bottlenecks and problems in the publication process, and also really issues for customer satisfaction and for authors on the ground in China. So our solution really has been to look towards WeChat, which is the major platform within China for communication. WeChat really is like an app like no other. It encompasses all the major apps that we would use in the West, from social media, payments, instant messaging, really into one mega app that we don't have a similar version of. In terms of its reach in China, you're looking at over 1 billion users and 82 minutes worth of engagement per day. So this really makes it the perfect platform to engage people in China with, as opposed to using email, which, as I've mentioned, is problematic. Being a platform, WeChat can be integrated with different apps, and there's now over 1 million apps available to download within the WeChat environment. So how does the Gateway work? Well, we started the journey 3 years ago with the initial part of Gateway, which was to integrate Western publishing systems, such as submission systems, platform, researcher app, into a European server. That then integrates through into China through a synchronization technology that allows us to translate messages from Western publication systems through into instant messages that can be sent through to China within seconds and integrated into WeChat. More recently, we built a front end to this, utilizing the app capability in WeChat. We've created a mini program within WeChat which acts as a front end that can become a publication hub for a publishing company within China to not just engage authors and not just to communicate with them, but also to really create a community hub for authors within the region. So this is what it looks like. We can create an app within WeChat that can be configured to a publisher's brand, that can include video, it can include text, different pages, really anything you wanted to build in here around the author experience in Chinese for authors in China. So it's a one-stop shop for those particular authors for that publisher. And within this, you can then set up notifications that allow end-to-end notifications of submission. So if you submit an article to that publisher, through WeChat, you can receive all the different milestone notifications along the journey, from peer review all the way through to publication and beyond, including potential alerts around citation or other things you'd wish to build in. In terms of the notifications, these all come through in Chinese, and it's as a publisher, you're able to configure and change these within the gateway and send and alter particular messages, and also create different journeys that link to content back in the mini program. So in terms of the impact on the publication process, what we're aiming for here is efficiencies. We're looking to improve communication through reducing missed messages, through reducing the number of queries that may go back to the editorial office, go back to the publisher. We're looking to increase engagement of that author with a publisher's brand. As a publisher, you're looking to engage authors, but also get them through to return authorship. Through the mini program, you can do that through the marketing content, through the notifications, and through the different ways of communicating with that particular author. And key for us is looking at satisfaction. As I mentioned at the start, we work with hundreds of authors per week in China, and what we're looking to do here is increase their satisfaction of the publication process, their understanding of that, and really improve the overall experience for them working with a particular publishing brand. Currently, the mini program has been rolled out with Taylor & Francis, where we're adding over 1,800 of T&F journals into the service. And also we're working with their marketing team to develop that mini program to deliver on their marketing aims within China. The Gateway is already working with a number of organizations, and we've got some additional publishers joining us over the next few weeks, including Hindawi, Wiley, Dove Press, Researcher App, and IOP. And I'd just really like to put a quick spotlight on our team who developed this. We're a global business. We have offices around the world, including China and Ukraine. This was really a collaborative effort between all the different teams. And obviously, it's been a very stressful period for our team in Ukraine, so I'd really just like to recognize all the work that they put into this back in March and April to deliver the product on time for the client. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. So next up is GigaByte, and that is Dr. Scott C. Edmunds. So Scott, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And yeah, I'd like to thank the judges and ALPS for acknowledging the work from a small but nimble publisher in Asia. And let's see if these slides work. Okay, so I have 7 minutes to talk to you about essentially XML first publishing workflow. That sounds very technical, very abstract, but I will attempt to convince you that this is a potential solution to address big problems that are some of the limiting factors in open science, and have now really gone mainstream with the open science recommendations. So for a decade, GigaScience, our first journal, was really focused on incentivizing and publishing open data. So we got a lot of good experience with this, over 1,000 papers, tens of terabytes of data, and we built a kind of workflow and a team with our own data repository, human beings who actually know how to work with authors to kind of share this stuff. So we got a lot of experience and expertise in this area of open data. And it's great to really see this kind of go mainstream end of last year with UNESCO signing and ratifying their recommendations on open science. Nearly 200 member states pledging to fulfill the human right of access to science and making commitments to start to apply this through legislation, work this into funding policies, to institutional policies, to policies in their countries. So we were really happy that this kind of validated a lot of the stuff that we've done, and when this came out for our 10th birthday, we really sat down and tried to map what parts of the open science recommendations we've done well at, and what do we still need to work on. And so the UNESCO defined 4 key pillars, and it seemed we've done a huge amount of work on what they term open science knowledge and open science infrastructures, integrating loads of third-party platforms that may be well known here, licensing, all of these things like this. All of the efforts have been in these 2 areas, and we really saw that where more work was needed, what we need to do in the next decade is focus on what they term open knowledge, open dialogue with other knowledge systems, and open engagement of societal actors. And this is the really tricky part of open science. Particularly the barriers of cost, because publishing is expensive. The barriers of engagement with the wider public, with indigenous groups, with the general community, through language, through jargon, through all of these many things. So and we kind of felt this in the last few years, that one of the things that stopped us tackling some of these later barriers was the technology, was the publishing platforms that we were using. And so 2 years ago, we launched a new journal. We've been working very closely with River Valley Technologies on a completely new, from scratch workflow. And the key thing is working with XML from end to end. And superficially, it's great because it avoids this kind of API spaghetti, less things kind of fall through the gaps, but it has a few bigger implications that can really help open science. For example, it makes embedding dynamic content incredibly easy. Into any integration, you give us any iframe, any bit of JavaScript, any bit of XML, and very quickly this can be embedded in articles. So these are our actual papers featuring video, featuring embedded maps. Why have static maps when it's much easier to just embed these things? Any type of visualization, 3D imaging, any kind of imaging models, you can interact with in situ in the paper, click on them, view them, really kind of get confidence and trust, view it in a virtual reality headset, and having the source data under there, you can push a button and then immediately print it on a 3D printer. This cost barrier is a huge one, and having this really automated workflow cuts out the vast majority of the production process. This is one of the biggest time and cost barriers, and effectively humans only need to come in at the very end to play around with pagination. Everything else is automated. Having this end-to-end platform as well means from the analytics you can really see that the whole process. Here's an example that we've done the entire River Valley have done the entire production in about 4 hours. And so this has enabled us to greatly reduce the article processing charge, reduce that barrier to currently we're charging $350 to cover all of these kind of like technical costs. And having everything in XML really breaks down the kind of comprehension barrier as well. It allows multilingual functionality. We've got Chinese, Portuguese, Spanish, examples that we can toggle. You can have dyslexic fonts, you can have fonts for the visually impaired. You can view your papers any way you like the sky is the limit. And so having this, all of these features of cost and additional kind of bells and whistles, we've started working with funders, with smaller projects that may not have budgets. And the WHO have funded a series of papers incentivizing the release of extremely important data for public health, vector-borne diseases in corners of the world that people haven't been sharing this data. And they could afford to cover a lot more papers because of our extremely low cost, removing all of that payment barrier to the people. And so this liberated over 500,000 data occurrences, half of these in Latin America. Phase 2 has just been authorized, so we're going to be publishing another whole batch of these papers. And this allows great things where, half our papers were from Latin America, with extreme public health interest to people in the field there. So we can toggle between English and Portuguese in this example. It's also linked to CLO preprints. Having the data in situ means that you can users can really understand this, interact, with the data in the paper, and then link out to the open data that they can accept. Just to summarize, we really feel this is a scalable tech. It's been tested programmatically to handle like 100,000 papers. We're working on further streamlining and automating the other kind of human parts of the workflow. But we really think it's potentially a great kind of, out-of-the-box solution for people not necessarily with the biggest budgets to meet and address these UNESCO Open Science recommendations and other policies linked to this, like the White House one. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Scott. So much more to say. So next up is Hum, and please welcome Dustin Smith. Dustin.
Great, thank you. Oh my goodies. Is it gonna work? Here we are. Okay, here. I'm with Hum. Hum is a customer data platform. How many people have heard of that term before? A few. So Hum sits at the nexus between people and content interactions throw up a ton of behavioral data. It's often talked about as a gold mine of data that publishers sit on. So Hum unifies it and makes it useful. I'm going to pursue a bold strategy today and not talk about CDPs. I'm going to talk about a component of the Hum platform which allows you to learn about the people who are interacting with your audience. So QBERT is an AI tagging engine, and ultimately QBERT reads content and applies tags to it. So Q is Content Understanding Engine. So anything that can be turned into text, it can read and then apply tags to. So certainly things like books and journals, but also gray-lit, blogs, emails, and even multimedia if you're able to do the transcription. Most publishers struggle with a consistent and complete set of tags, and things like author and editor supplied keywords often are very varied and sort of all over the place, and too many to really make sense of. So even small publishers may have something like 80 or 100,000 tags because it's author or editor applied. QBERT contains a large amount of general intelligence. It's based on a large language model out of Google, and it's taught to apply tags to content. But what we also do is we train Qbert on each publisher's piece of content, each publisher's corpus, as well as taxonomy. And so what you get is across your entire corpus, all of a publisher's content, consistent and complete set of tags that are automatically applied in real time. So why is this interesting? Why is this important? Well, one is topic engagement. Ultimately, what are your audiences interested in? What are they engaging with? And things like which topics co-vary with each other. And those things drive things like special issues. And so ultimately you're able to get the sort of topic engagement when you have that consistent and complete set of tags. But not just at an individual topic level, you also have your content performance at a global scale. So not just your publishing platform, but all of the different pieces of content. Everything from events to email newsletters to alerts. So how is your content performing globally? And what are the areas of emerging researcher interest? What are the combination of content type and topic popularity? Are there more scholarly topics, obviously, in the journals, and more professional development over on the blog and Greylit side? But this isn't just good for analytics, this is good for machines. And so ultimately, if you have a consistent and complete set of tags, you have the foundations to do true Netflix-style or Amazon-style content recommendations. So automated content recommendations via widgets on site. And these are things which drive 2 to 3x of the sort of engagement that you see with basically editor-selected pieces. There's also hyper-targeted advertising. So ultimately, if your content is consistently and completely tagged, that gives you the foundation to actually learn about what people are engaging with, the sort of topics they're rubbing off on, the things that they're really engaged with in the last, say, 90 days, the things that they're very, very interested in. And what you're able to do is actually pass that to other systems, which can serve the targeted advertising. And we see up to 10x the sort of value that you're able to drive when you're able to do the sort of hyper-targeted advertising. You also can do author and reviewer recruitment. So imagine if you have consistently and completely tagged content, then ultimately you can understand who are the authors, and often it's readers, authors, reviewers, editors, often the same people. And so what are they reading and what are they engaged with? And you combine that with things like signals from visiting author tools pages, and that becomes a very interesting way to engage with people on a personal level. Same thing with reviewers. A lot of the data that's drawn from for reviewers, for reviewer selection and recruitment, is very coarse-grained. What have they published in the past? But often that trails up to a year or 2 years. What have they been reading in the last 90 days? What are they really engaged with? And so you're pulling from a group of people who are potentially susceptible to actually responding to your communications and do so in a way that it is considerably more personalized. I wanted to do it a little bit quickly. The thing was, I gave you a little bit of taste of the CDP side of the house. So ultimately, if you're able to build consistent profiles on individuals, you're able to learn about your audience, you're able to use that intelligence, that behavioral data that comes off of those user content interactions to drive things like segmentation and personalization and fulfill use cases like author and reviewer recruitment. So there's your QR code, which we might keep up for 2 seconds if people want to point a camera at it, but I really appreciate the opportunity.
Great, thank you very much. Good job. Okay, next up is ICLR Case Genie built by 67 Bricks. So please welcome Emma Watkins. There.
Okay. Dum, dum, dum. Of course, for the technology company, it doesn't work. There we go. Right. Okay, hi, welcome. Welcome, you've been here ages. I'm Emma, I'm the head of marketing for 67 Bricks, and I'm here to talk about Case Genie, which is a tool that we built on behalf of ICLR, which are the Incorporated Council of Law Reporting for England and Wales. Sorry, Scotland, you're not included. And that is part of the bigger platform development that we have done on their behalf as well. So, picture the scene. You are a lawyer and you're trying to build a case. You've built what's known as a skeleton argument, and now you need to look up relevant case law that will be able to support you in court. Your user journey will be one that's pretty familiar to most of us in this room, in that you sit at a desktop, you type some keywords into a search box, and then you wait for the results to come back, filter, rinse and repeat over and over again to try and find the things that you need. And it's a well-established, if a little bit time-intensive way of doing things. And of course, it's an improvement on the last few hundred years of leafing through paper books. But realistically, over the last 20 years or so, that user experience hasn't really changed that much, other than things like search getting a little bit more clever and filtering getting a little bit more sophisticated. And at 67 Bricks, we've long felt that there's a real opportunity for things like AI and machine learning to leverage and make search results much, much smarter, to help unlock things like unknown unknowns, all without burdening the user with ever-increasing long lists of hits for them to have to try and manually filter through. And so, for the lawyer you pictured at the beginning, that will change with Case Genie. So we've turned that experience on its head. Now, a lawyer can simply upload a skeleton argument, and then, if that could be a PDF, Word document, text file, they could even just grab up to 100,000 characters from a clipboard and paste it into Case Genie, wait a few moments, and then sit back and have Case Genie deliver the results that they need. Once this has happened and you get these results coming back to you, the tool is actually smart enough, thanks to natural language processing, to deliver results that are obscure yet conceptually similar, the kind of things that you would just really struggle to find through traditional keyword search. And that's not it. From there, you also get linked cases, cases which cite or are cited by the similar cases that have been recommended. And then from there, there's even more time saving to be had. If in your skeleton argument you've uploaded any kind of case law, Case Genie will come back to you and tell you how that's fared in recent court decisions, whether it's been approved, upheld, overruled. So as a lawyer, you can really save time by having a look and seeing really quickly whether the arguments you want to use are actually going to work for you in court. So I know what some of you may be thinking. Machine learning can be full of bias, and surely it's problematic to embed something like that within the legal system. So, as some of you who may remember the old shampoo commercials may remember, here comes the science bit. Machine learning falls into two categories, supervised and unsupervised. Supervised learning uses example data that teaches the machine learning algorithm how to predict a given outcome. So, of course, since it's based usually on previous human decisions, it comes with all the bias that those people's decisions will have, whether that's conscious or unconscious. Unsupervised learning, however, is not based on previous human decisions. The models created by unsupervised learning map connections between the data, but they don't try to predict anything. So Case Genie uses unsupervised machine learning to build document embeddings for each case report and judgment transcript. The only bias it can embody is the way that judges use language, and that's actually really interesting and useful, because since language changes over time, any two cases that are linked in time and talking about the similar sorts of things will actually be more likely to be surfaced as relevant. So for the people writing modern skeleton arguments, more recent case law will be more likely to be returned to them, which is going to be super relevant for them, whereas older but important documents will also be there as part of the linked results. That's it for the science. We're really proud of the partnership we've built with ICLR and of the tool that we've built on their behalf. But what's more, we're also really excited about the opportunities that working with stuff like this can bring to information providers of all shapes and sizes. The more that we can all help our communities to fight through the ever-increasing noise, to find not just data, but insights, the better for all of us. We all know, and it's been mentioned on the previous panel, that research is growing ever more interdisciplinary. And that creates a really unique problem for researchers trying to work with adjacent or even far distant fields to find insights. You know, economics researchers are using research published in behavioral journals, for example. Physicists are looking at papers in complex networks from computer science, and that gets used in animal behavior, and that then gets used by robotics, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on and gets ever more complicated. And so, as gatekeepers of the scientific record, we have the ability here to facilitate this knowledge sharing. And the more we can explore ways to just shake up the traditional user-driven, time-wasting processes to find connections for researchers that they might just have missed, to create those aha moments, the more we can cement our role within the research ecosystem. AI and machine learning are certainly not magic bullets, but they have great potential to do some of the heavy lifting on behalf of subject matter experts. And we are in a great position as an industry to evolve the relationship that our users have with our content for the better. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Emma. So next up is Impact Services from Emerald Publishing and Steve Lodge. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, David. Take its time. Next one as well. There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve Lodge. I'm Head of Services for Emerald Publishing. Here to introduce our Impact Services platform. Impact Services, the platform, was actually developed for those who want to build their impact literacy. So when I say impact literacy, I mean the ability to kind of understand, appraise, and make decisions on how research resonates with the world outside of the academy. Impact is quite a loaded term. I think it also becomes very subjected or often subjected to a number of proxy measures of success or evidence that aren't necessarily fit for purpose. So we'll talk a lot about things like scholarly attention, you know, how well read has a piece of research been, how well cited. Or we will talk about awareness, what does that look like in terms of public engagement activities or social media. And all of these things are vitally important, but if impact is the provable benefits of research in the real world, then evidence needs to be what has changed. What's gone up, what's come down, what's improved, what's gone better. Impact is obviously very topical. You don't have to go too far, certainly in academic circles, to be hearing about the subject of research impact. Certainly here in the UK, but also in Australia, Hong Kong, Malaysia, going into other parts of Europe, into South Africa. Certainly anywhere where funding mandates are increasingly looking at putting impact front and centre of consideration for successful applications. I won't try and open the rabbit hole too far, but certainly when we start to think about institutional assessment as well, universities are being asked to provide evidence of impact that has occurred as a result of research that has been stemming out of their universities. And it's very, very complex to do. I think what is increasingly becoming apparent is that impact needs very careful and considerate planning from the outset. We were fortunate with Impact Services to work with two experts in the field of research impact, Dr. David Phipps and Dr. Julie Bailey. They would go a step further. They would say planning is essential, yes, but institutions need to be looking at ways in which they can weave impact into everything that happens within that university, across their strategy, across their mission, across their daily operations. And indeed, researchers still require skills and learning content to be able to put some of that work into practice. We set out to try and see how we could help in this space. We were fortunate a number of universities were kind enough to open the doors to their research offices so that we could see some of these challenges head on. What we found, there's a distinct lack of support and capacity within the research office, who are increasingly being asked to tackle some of these issues alone. There wasn't really a space or means whereby a university could start thinking about how impact was affecting each element of their strategy and their mission. And indeed, there really aren't a myriad and a vast number of resources available or frameworks available to plan for impact or to put some of those things into practice. A number of those research institutions became early adopters to what has now become our Impact Services platform. And the platform is designed to kind of help in three main ways. So the first is through an impact health check. It's effectively a diagnostic tool that allows a university to start thinking about impact through the lens of 5 C's and how that affects them as a university. Those 5 C's being sort of clarity, how clear is everybody around what impact is and what that means to us? How committed are we as an organisation to try and make sure that it succeeds? What competency are available or kind of lack of competency is available that we need to address? What's kind of our stance on sort of code production, and how connected are all the various different departments in making all of this happen? And it results in a bit of a report that they can use to then think about where they want to be heading to next. The second component is a toolkit of skills and learning content, some 200 pieces of content that we commissioned from those who are kind of facing into these challenges day to day. That are aligned to an impact framework that cover things like stakeholder engagement, communication, strategy, and planning. And the third component is our impact planner, which is kind of the engine of the service, really. It's the way in which academics can start to think about their research projects right at the outset through what they want to achieve by thinking about the problem they're looking to try and solve, the change they are looking to affect, so ultimately their piece of the puzzle, their contribution. Critically, the people that they're going to need to work with along that journey as well to make this happen, not necessarily just in framing the problem, but those who can really help make sure that the research gets towards the end beneficiaries of that work as well. Start thinking around some of the evidence and the indicators they'll need to know that they're being successful, and a space to be thinking about challenges along the way as well. They're the three component parts. Who's it really for? Well, essentially anybody in academic research who's looking to contribute to real change. So whether that be senior leadership within a research institution looking to establish the degree to which their culture and environment is set up for impact to really thrive, whether it be support within in the research office, anyone looking to work with academics on making sure their projects can fulfill their ultimate potential and alleviate some of the burden on research office support staff who have to do this on a very regular basis. And at an individual level, researchers who are looking to try to understand how they can plan research effectively to contribute to real change, and indeed anybody in the academic community who wants to try and look at how they can contribute and what their piece of the puzzle could look like to deliver upon kind of better research outcomes. From an Emerald perspective, and we think about it from a service provision of where we are, this is, I guess, a little bit further upstream. We spend a lot of our time on our service provision looking at trying to help people deliver real value from research outputs and creating a space that affords kind of tools to enable quick and effective dissemination of some of their key outputs. Impact services is a little bit earlier on in that journey, when it's essentially trying to help plan for better research outcomes at the outset, helps to try and make better connections with funding requirements, and ultimately offers tools to help plan for impact from the start and collaborate for real change. I guess ultimately it's about trying to extend our usefulness across the workflow. Thank you. It's involved contributions from a lot of people along the way. It's in its first year. It needs and is getting a bit of time to breathe, but we've been really delighted with uptake so far, and really excited to see where it heads. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Okay, next up then is the Joint Commitment for Action on Inclusion and Diversity in Publishing, and please welcome Nicola Nugent from the Royal Society of Chemistry.
Good afternoon, everyone. As David said, I'm Nicola Nugent. I'm Publishing Manager, Quality and Ethics at Royal Society of Chemistry. First of all, I'd just like to thank the judging panel for shortlisting the Joint Commitment for Action on Inclusion and Diversity in Publishing for this year's ALPS Awards. We're really honoured and truly excited to be here amongst these fantastic finalists. So in my 7 minutes, I'm going to try and cover a very brief overview of what the Joint Commitment is and how it came about, some information about who's involved and how it works, highlights what we've achieved so far, and also a brief look at the future as well. So, how do I work this thing? There we go. So it all started with this document, which is the Royal Society of Chemistry's Framework for Action in Scientific Publishing, in which we, Royal Society of Chemistry, set out the steps we're taking to minimise bias from our journals publishing. We launched this document back in the first half of 2020 and with our editorial boards and our internal editorial teams, and we used it and we continue to use it to evaluate progress, stimulate conversations, and plan and prioritise opportunities for action. And we recognise that that framework, while RSC focused to an extent, could be useful for other publishers, and we wanted to share it. And so after having received some initial positive feedback from a couple of contacts in other publishers, we set up a workshop with around 9 or 10 other publishers where we had contacts to share our framework. And as well as sharing the framework, we facilitated a discussion session to talk about the areas in which publishers could collaborate. And a direct outcome and a direct output of that workshop was the Joint Commitment Statement. The statement in full is available on our website and the link at the top right of the slide. But on the slide here are the 4 priority areas that were identified and articulated in that workshop, which form essentially the basis of the Joint Commitment Statement. And these are the areas on which signatory organisations have committed to collaborate. So first of all, understanding our research community. This is about working together to enable diversity data to be self-reported by members of our community. Reflecting the diversity of our community is then going on to use that data, appropriately aggregated and anonymised, to understand baseline diversity and potentially to work towards better and more inclusive representation of authors, reviewers, and editorial decision makers. Sharing success to achieve impact is all about making sure that we share our learning and knowledge with each other, work together to share our policies transparently, work using shared language and standards, and really just all about working together to move inclusion and diversity forward more quickly. Finally, we also committed back in 2020 to setting minimum standards on which to build, and I'm pleased to say that if you look on the website now, you'll see a link to a set of minimum standards that we published back in November last year for publishers to adopt. So thinking about who's involved, we started out with 13 signatories back in June 2020, and since then we've grown to over 50. And as you can see, the members are from all types of publisher, covering all disciplines. And so it's really clear to see that inclusion and diversity is an issue that matters to and affects all of us. And while some of the more specific challenges might vary by discipline, we have very many common challenges that we can and do tackle together. And I think one of the major achievements of the initiative has been enabling publishers to put aside some of their competitive differences to really drive change across publishing as a whole. And my personal view is that as the Royal Society of Chemistry, as a society publisher and as an organisation that's done quite a lot of credible work on inclusion and diversity already, put us in a really great position so that publishers across the sector trust us to lead this change. In terms of how it works, so it's not just a statement on a website, it's all about action. So we have a working group comprising at least one representative from each signatory organisation, and we have subgroups taking forward specific areas of action under each of those 4 commitments I spoke about to really make sure that we deliver on those commitments. The subgroups meet and share information regularly, and we have whole group meetings of all representatives 3 times per year to review progress, agree actions, and set direction. Looking at what we've achieved so far, this timeline shows what I think has been some really amazing progress that the group has made in the past couple of years since our inception back in that workshop back in June 2020. And right from the beginning, we served as a knowledge sharing network, sharing learning and resources. We've worked on topics such as author name change practices, tackling harmful historical content, and as I mentioned, we launched minimum standards for publishers to adopt back in November last year. Our most recent and arguably most significant achievement is the publication of recommended questions for the collection of gender identity and race and ethnicity data, which we put out in April of this year. And as we developed those recommended questions, we worked with peer review system providers to deliver the functionality for publishers to collect this sensitive demographic data. And since releasing the questions, we've been working on encouraging uptake and their use. This slide just shows some of the other organisations that we have touch points with, whether that's as guest speakers at our meetings, such as Leading Roots or ORCID, or more in-depth collaboration, such as with peer review system providers. A lot of you will be familiar with C4DISC, fantastic organisation whose work really complements that of the joint commitment. We've been in contact with representatives from C4DISC since the beginning and have had, for example, reciprocal attendance at meetings, and we continue to keep those communication channels open. We're hoping to work with NISO on standardizing those recommended data collection questions I mentioned, and we've connected with COPE and STM on author name change policies, sharing our good practice guidelines with their working groups, and likewise again with COPE on our harmful content workshop. Thank you. And finally, with 30 seconds to go, I'll take a glimpse into the future. So, although hopefully I've demonstrated we've achieved a great deal, we're certainly under no illusion that we can tick some boxes and say that we're done. We need to, and we are continuing to actively work on delivering those original 4 commitments that we made. We very recently refreshed our subgroup structures, so now some of the initial subgroups have delivered some of their goals. We're refocusing and refreshing. Our major focus in the immediate term is on encouraging publishers to collect diversity data and to use those recommended questions to do so. And finally, in the next few weeks, we have a workshop planned where we will be talking with all of the group members about the longer term future and priorities of the initiative. So all that remains is for me to say thank you again to the judges for shortlisting the initiative and to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nicola. Okay, and our final speaker this afternoon is Thomas Lemberger from EMBO on Review Commons. Thomas.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, David, and thank you everybody for staying. Thank you to all the jury who gives us the opportunity to present today. Today, I'm going to present the latest innovation from EMBO in the field of open science, and this is the Review Commons platform. Review Commons is a preprint peer review platform that we have launched in collaboration with ALPSP, and it is operated by EMBO Press. So I think everybody is familiar with the conventional practice of the peer review process, where a manuscript, a study is first submitted to a journal that then runs the peer review process. And with Review Commons, we turn this upside down. The manuscript is first peer reviewed in a journal independent way, and we release the peer review next to a preprint. We call this a refereed preprint that is publicly available. And this refereed preprint can be then transferred to a journal that is collaborating with us and that can use the reviews right away for making editorial decision. And the implementation of this journal independent peer review, as we do it in Review Commons, works like this. The authors submit their manuscript to Review Commons that then runs the peer review, an in-depth and high-quality peer review process, exactly the same as we do at our own journals, on this manuscript. After peer review, Review Commons does not take any editorial decision, so we remain completely agnostic. We forward the reviews to the authors, who have then a time period to prepare a reply to these reviews and post them on bioRxiv or medRxiv. So there are the reviews and the reply from the authors to form these public referee preprints that can then be transferred to one of the journals that are collaborating with us. And importantly, the information, the identity of the reviewers is transferred confidentially to the journal, such that they can make a decision on the available reviews without starting the process from scratch. If the journal is interested in publishing the work, they formulate requests for revision to bring the study at the standard of the journal, and the paper is being published. So we have 3 major goals with Review Commons. The first is really to accelerate the dissemination, the public dissemination of peer-reviewed research. This is very important. We all know now after COVID how important this is, and it lends confidence and trust to preprints. The second is to eliminate redundant cycles of peer review once a paper is rejected and submitted to another journal. And finally, there is a very important goal, which is to inspire a cultural change in the practice of peer review by focusing the peer review process really on the science in the paper, its importance, its validity, but in a fashion that is independent of the fit of a scope to the scope of a journal. So we are collaborating with 17 journals across 6 publishers, and you see them all here, who remarkably agreed to use the peer review reports from Review Commons without starting their own peer review from scratch. So really using the full peer review as efficiently as possible. Does it work? The answer is yes. It takes 74 days on average to release a refereed preprint, and this includes the peer review process, plus the time that is required by the authors to formulate a very detailed response. And you see here an example of how it looks like on bioRxiv, where you have full access to the entire peer review process. Now, does a journal independent peer review works for the authors? Does it work for the journals? And the answer is yes as well. 97% of the authors choose to transfer their paper to one of the journals of our consortium. And we know that for published papers, it takes roughly two attempts to publish the paper. You see the distribution of the published paper across all the publishers we are working with, and you see that the distribution is quite even, and there is no enrichment for low or high selectivity journal. I show also that some publishers do very nice collections around refereed preprint, and I show the example of the Company of Biologists here. So did we succeed in eliminating these redundant rounds of peer review? So we have asked all the journals to report back data. How many times did they nevertheless invite new reviewers, additional reviewers, for whatever reason is needed? And you see that in 95% of the papers that have been processed by those journals, no new reviewers were invited. So this was an extremely satisfying result. We have asked also the community of authors and reviewers, well, what do you think about this journal agnostic peer review? Should we change it maybe? Should we amend it, or should we stay really journal agnostic? And I think it's fair to say that there's overwhelming support from researchers for this type of peer review that is science-focused and journal independent. And this is one of the most popular features of review comments. Now, this culture shift is also extending to funders, including EMBO and Plan S participating funders who now recognize refereed preprint as a valid and recognized research output for peer-reviewed research for eligibility criteria to funding schemes and for this, funding decisions. And this is, of course, a great help for young researchers and postdoc who wish to apply to a fellowship, to a grant, as early as possible in their career. So in conclusion, I think with review comments, we are really creating synergies between the preprint ecosystem and the journal publishing ecosystem. With the refereed preprint, we accelerate the dissemination and the release of peer-reviewed research. We provide early credit to young researchers, and we add trust to the preprint. With the transfer to the journals, by eliminating the redundancy in the peer review process, we increase the efficiency of the formal journal publishing process. And I think we see review comments really as a blueprint that could be replicated, that has the ability to catalyze a profound change in scientific publishing, but at the same time promoting adoption of open science and transparency in the peer review, and at the same time improving the journal publishing process. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, thanks. Thank you very much. Well, you can see what an excellent selection of finalists we had. Makes our job as judges very difficult. But I can reveal that this year the judges have agreed there will be 2 joint winners. So there are 2 joint winners out of those 7. Who do you think it is? Well, I'm sure you can chat later in the bar and discuss who you think it might be. We didn't have time for questions in this session, but all of the finalists have red tags on their name badges. So do chat to them, ask them for demos and so on. I'm sure they'll share their slides with you if they'd like to do that as well. So that's it for this session. I'll hand over to Wayne in a second just to wrap things up, but could we just show our appreciation for all of our finalists today? Thank you. Thank you.